All right, so here's a quick pro tip. If you got a lawnmower that's really hard to pull or start, or just rips your arm out, or you just need to make a valve adjustment. So Honda's going to recommend checking the valve clearance or checking adjusting the valve clearance every 100 hours or once a year, whatever comes first. Now, I understand your average consumer, your average homeowner, it's going to take a while to put 100 hours on a walk-behind lawnmower. But if you're experiencing symptoms of hard to start, hard to pull, kickback, or just like this customer stated here, rips their arm off, it might be a good time to go ahead and check that valve clearance. Also today, while we have the valve cover off, we're just going to take a quick look at the decompression valve. And that's because, well, I'm not sure if any of you guys noticed, Honda pulled all their lawnmowers off their shelves earlier last year. It was an immediate stop sell. Very noticeable at Lowe's and Home Depot. But there was a huge lawsuit going on for the faulty decompression valve straight from the manufacturer. Customers and owners were stating they were injuring their shoulder, extreme kickback, just getting hurt, just not a good time overall. And that's because, well, the decompression valve is designed to briefly open both the intake and exhaust valve for a split second at a very slow speed and relieving pressure, allowing the operator to pull the cord effortlessly. Now, without this mechanism, it would be very, very hard to start. Think of it trying to start a diesel truck by hand or manually. It's almost impossible. So, while we have the valve cover off, we're just going to do a quick 2-point inspection. We're just going to check the spring and the weight and just overall operation and just make sure it's working okay. So the most common problem that I find on improper valve clearance, especially on the exhaust side, the engine is going to smell or seem to run very rich. Now, when I say rich, that means it's getting too much fuel and not enough air, or it might seem like that. Or you might be experiencing some kind of gas vapor, or the exhaust just doesn't smell right. You're just not familiar with this odor. You've never noticed it in the past, but you do notice it now. That could be improper valve clearance. All right, now that we got that out the way, you got your spark plug disconnected for safety reasons. What we want to do first, we want to check the valve clearance first. That's because if it's the valve clearance is the problem, you won't have to go ahead and dismount the engine from the deck, which is going to save you a lot of hassle if you're not comfortable doing. So we're going to tear open this valve cover and check the valve clearance next. And you might want to grab a rag or paper towel if you want to protect the deck from getting all oily, because when we take this cover off, oil is going to come out even if you drain all the oil. So one other pro tip when you are taking this valve cover out, so this doesn't continue to leak or drip oil, you could slightly prop the engine up at an angle. That will keep the oil from draining forward and keep it from just dripping all over the deck. All right, so now that we got all 4 bolts removed, it's time to go ahead and take this off. The valve cover will not fall off on its own. That's because it is held together with Honda Bond, which is a gasket underneath here. So in order to get this cover off, you are going to have to pry it off. When you're doing this, you want to try to limit the problem or limit trying to bend this cover. Now, worst case scenario, if you do go too hard on it and bend it too much, you could just hammer it back into shape or form on a flat surface. But you really want to limit how much you bend these ears here on the top and bottom. Also, I'm going to go ahead and remove the spark plug. That way we get better access when we try to pry this off. There are a couple areas. There's 2 posts right here on top of the cylinder head and near the valve cover that you could pry with that are a little bit more stable and more secure, and you don't have to worry about breaking it. What I found best, just going right behind here by the bolt, where the bolt bolts into, and you'll see there's a little tab or ear that you can pry it forward with, and you'll feel it pop or hear it pop, and this has probably never been off. And there you go. And the Honda Bond will unhinge. All right, now that we got the timing cover off, we need to get this thing to top dead center, but let's go ahead and explain what we're looking at. We got our exhaust valve spring, rocker arm, and tappet, and also the intake as well. Rocker arm, spring, tappet. These are the adjusters. This is the cam gear. Honda's very unique. They're the only manufacturer that I'm aware of that has a timing belt built into their small engines, which is pretty unique. So before we go forward, we have to make sure that we get this engine at top dead center before we make any adjustments whatsoever, especially to the valves. This is very important because there are two different top dead centers. So Honda has a procedure, a method that is very easy to do and very easy to follow. The only problem is it's only going to apply to Honda engines that have a cast iron flywheel like the one seen here. Now, if you have an aluminum flywheel, this will not apply. But if you have a cast iron flywheel, all you have to do, turn the flywheel over. What we're going to do, we're going to line up this edge of the magnet on the flywheel with the edge of the ignition coil, just like that. Now you're at top dead center. Once you got those edges lined up, go ahead, reach down, take a look at your rocker arms, give them a little wiggle, and if they're tight, that's not good. That means the valves aren't closed, which also verifies that we are not at top dead center. So, if you find yourself in that situation, just go ahead and turn the flywheel over again. We're going to line up the edge of the flywheel magnet with the ignition coil edge on the right side, just like that. Now go down, take a look at those rocker arms, nice and loose. That means that we are at top dead center, so we could go ahead and make the adjustment to the valves. When these are loose at top dead center, that means that both valves are closed, and that's what you want. So we're going to go ahead and start off by checking the clearance on the intake valve first. So your service value is going to be 0.15 millimeters plus or minus 0.04. So grab your feeler gauge, make sure you have the correct gauge, 0.15 millimeters, and go ahead and insert that between the valve stem and the adjustment screw. Go ahead and check the clearance on the opposite side. This will be the exhaust side. Your service value for the exhaust side, the clearance should be 0.20 millimeters plus or minus 0.04. Grab your feeler gauge, confirm you have the right gauge, insert that between the valve stem and the adjustment screw. And as expected, it is super loose. Very large gap. There's no resistance, no pull, no nothing. So we've got to adjust the exhaust side. All right, so now that we confirmed that we only need to adjust the exhaust side, the valve stem, the clearance is way too large. We need to dial that in. We need to get this down to 0.20 millimeters. Now the next step is to go ahead and loosen the lock nut or jam nut, and then we're going to dial this in until we have a clearance of 0.20 millimeters. Now Honda does offer an SST for this procedure, but I highly doubt you'll need it. A simple adjustable wrench and a pair of pliers will get the job done. Grab your feeler gauge, confirm that you got the correct size, which is 0.20 millimeters for the exhaust, and go ahead and stick that in between the valve stem and the adjustment screw. Now, all we're going to do, you can do this by hand, we're just going to go ahead and turn the adjustment screw. Make sure you give yourself some room to adjust it. We're going to turn the adjustment screw until it touches the feeler gauge. Now, we need to go ahead and secure that down and make sure we don't move the adjustment screw while locking down the lock nut. Go ahead and just tighten down the jam nut by hand as much as possible without turning the adjustment screw, while holding the adjustment screw in place, making sure it doesn't move, or adjustable wrench or crescent wrench, and simply lock down the jam nut. Now, before you go ahead and reinstall the valve cover, go ahead and double check your work, because let's be honest, no one likes to do the same job twice. On the intake side, 0.15 millimeters, and the exhaust side, 0.20 millimeters, and we're good. All right, time out. Quick side note and story lesson. So a very good friend of mine came across a free Honda lawnmower, an HRX at that, you know, the fancy one with the plastic deck and the big engine. It was free, so he couldn't pass it up, and he took it home. Got it home, couldn't get it to start. Brought it to me, I couldn't get it to start. So I went to my #1 diag tool, which is a can of starter fluid. I'm telling you right now, folks, a can of starter fluid is gonna answer so many questions all at once. After spraying it down, still nothing. So I did a compression test next. And this thing was so easy to pull, I swear a baby could have pull started this thing. So I removed the valve cover and voila, lo and behold, someone had already parted this thing out. They had already removed the exhaust valve, rocker arm, and pivot arm. So basically the moral of this story is this is a very common problem with these engines. And also, if you ever see a curbside special lawnmower that looks very enticing, like the one seen here, it says free, take me, you might be playing yourself. So let's say that you check all your clearances on the intake and exhaust and everything looks great and everything's within spec, but you're still having a problem starting the engine. You might need to replace the decompression valve. So there's two ways that Honda recommends checking to see if you have a faulty decompression valve. The first method is going to be your compression tester. And this is the easier way because you don't have to remove anything. All you have to do is remove the spark plug and install a compression test. So after installing your compression tester, we're going to give this several pull starts to get an accurate test. All right, go back to your compression tester and see the reading, and we're right at 60. So here's the value limits for the compression test: 60 to 71 PSI. Anything higher than 71 PSI, Honda recommends replacing the cam gear assembly or the decompression valve. So the second option, you will have to go ahead and remove the valve cover again, and make sure you access the cam gear assembly, and preferably you want to turn it to where you can see this weight right here. So basically Honda recommends simply sliding this back and forth several times. At any point that does not spring back into its location or resting spot, you've got a bad decompression valve, or the return spring for the decompression valve is broken and you have to replace it. So what we're looking at is the cam gear assembly as a whole. The actual decompression valve mechanism is right up here. Overall, this assembly is very durable, that being made of plastic. I think you'd be shocked on how long this usually lasts. The number one thing is this tiny little return spring. Now, it's been a while since I've had to purchase these, but I'm pretty sure you might be able to buy just the spring itself. If not, you might need to purchase the whole cam gear assembly. So basically how this works is when you go to start the engine, there's not enough centrifugal force to swing this weight open. So at very low RPMs, your decompression valve is going to be open. Once you start the engine, the RPMs are going to quickly rise to about 3,000 RPM, swinging the weight out and closing the valve. And now you're at normal operation. So if you do find yourself needing to replace this assembly or cam gear assembly, please note there are two different sizes. This one is designed or made for the 190cc engine, and you can see it's stamped right here. On the GCV 160, there is no stamp, so just pay close attention if you do purchase one online sight unseen. The difference is the decompression valve is going to be a little bit larger on the 190 as to the 160. All right, it's time to test it out. Now that we made all of our adjustments, let's go ahead and check it out and see if it's any easier to start. Much better. All right, boys and girls, that about wraps it up. And well, that's all the pro tips I'm willing to give out today. So thanks for watching. Hope this helps.